involve you a little bit too about a specific category, this refugee resettlement, Cubans, Haitians. But let me just focus on the Cuban one because I know that one well. So if you come from Cuba, you are presumed to be for fleeing political persecution. So you automatically are eligible for refugee cash. You're eligible for food stamps. You're eligible for Medicaid. Others who immigrate to this country have to wait 5 years for those and don't get the refugee cash. But within a year, depending if you're paroled, you can apply for a green card. And then you can travel back to Cuba as often as you want. Multiple times. You can take cash. You can buy stuff with the food stamps. I've seen it. Okay, this is not, I didn't read this in a magazine. I've seen it. They use the food stamps, they fill up these bags, and they take it back to Cuba over there. Or they just transfer cash back. Some people go back to Cuba for 3 months at a time. They've been here a year. How, if you were fleeing persecution, how can it be that a year later you were spending summers in Cuba? How can it be that less than a year later you're traveling back 6, 8 times a year to Cuba? I've never heard of people fleeing persecution going back to a place repeatedly. There's an issue here, is there not?
Almost 50,000 Cubans from the Miami area in Florida are facing deportations. That's because thousands of those Cubans filed for political asylum and were granted political asylum, except they went back and visited their homeland of Cuba. Well, the big deal is that when you file for political asylum, you're declaring that your life is in danger in your home country. And by these Cubans going back to Cuba to visit, that means that the entire process of the political asylum was fraud. The application asked for political asylum seekers to give detail of why they can't go back to their country, why their lives are in danger in their homeland. And Cubans gave those statements that their life was in danger if they ever went back to Cuba. So going back to visit Cuba after you've been granted political asylum indicates that these Cubans have been granted political asylum based on false information. Now, it's no secret, Cubans played a huge role on the re-election of Donald Trump. And a lot of them feel let down by this administration because now they're being sent back home. So I'm going to ask all the Latino community, and I will do the same, to please hold a moment of silence for the thousands of Cubans who now are going to be forced to go back to the island.
As you may have heard, many Cubans with permanent residency may now be facing deportation after having returned to Cuba with their permanent residence card. And this is because when you file for asylum and you are granted asylum, and many of these individuals obtain their permanent residency after seeking asylum successfully, they are essentially saying that they're scared to return to their home country. And so when they did return to Cuba, now they are being flagged for committing fraud. And if in fact you travel back to your home country, whether you're from Cuba or not, if you have asylum granted and you are now a permanent resident, you should be very, very wary of traveling back to your home country and not being placed in secondary inspection when you re-enter the United States. It is obvious that you're going to be flagged, and I've been saying this for many years. You shouldn't even travel back if you are a U.S. citizen and you became a U.S. citizen by way of permanent residency, by way of an asylum granted. At any point, you are subject to a review of that. And if it is determined that you became a U.S. citizen through fraud or a permanent resident through fraud, they can try and place you in removal proceedings to take away your citizenship and or your permanent residency. So let this be a warning for anybody considering returning to your home country after affirmatively and successfully getting asylum in the United States, because this will likely flag immigration and give them a reason to place you in removal proceedings in an attempt to strip